While swimming, the two sisters unexpectedly discovered something unsettling. At the bottom of the pool, there was a diamond ring. Seeing that no one around had noticed it, Emma immediately dived in. She fixed her eyes on the ring and descended to retrieve it. However, the ring was stuck in the drainage grate. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't pull it free. Seeing that her sister was taking too long to resurface, Sophie quickly removed her clothes and jumped in to help. But the ring was wedged far too tightly. Despite their combined efforts, they could not move it, even though it was right in front of them. While pulling together, something went wrong. Their hair became tangled in the drain. Emma panicked instantly and grabbed Sophie's hair to pull her free, but she still couldn't untangle her. The current had already trapped their hair. At the same time, the pool's closing time had arrived. The attendant was about to leave when he glanced at the water and pressed the closing button. The pool cover began to slide shut slowly. The two sisters continued struggling in the water. Seeing the cover closing in, Emma realized something was wrong, but Sophie was still trapped underwater. She gathered all her strength and finally managed to free her sister. By then, the cover was almost completely shut. They swam desperately towards the surface, but it was already too late. When they finally emerged, they realized the severity of the situation. On arrival, the attendant had told them the pool was closed at weekends, and that day was Friday. That meant they were likely to be trapped there for 3 days. Realizing this, they began banging on the cover for help, but no matter how hard they shouted, no one responded above them. After a long time of no response, the sisters were close to breaking down, yet Emma remained calm. She decided they needed clues and might still find a way out, urging Sophie not to give up. Soon after, Sophie found a piece of clothing in the corner. Emma, meanwhile, discovered a plastic board nearby. Sophie then spotted a ventilation opening. After inspecting it, Emma believed it could be an exit. It might offer a way out. However, after several attempts, they failed again. They would need another solution. Emma remembered the plastic board and immediately retrieved it. She tried to widen the opening using its edges, but after half an hour, the gap remained unchanged. Sophie had already lost hope and told her to stop wasting her energy. Just as they felt completely stuck, a noise suddenly came from above the pool. It was Emma's fiancé, James, who had tried calling her after noticing she hadn't returned home, but the phone had been left outside the pool area. It kept ringing, unanswered. Thinking of her upcoming wedding, Emma dove back into the water. After great effort, she finally retrieved the ring. She then tried to remove the drainage grate. Perhaps she could use it to break the pool cover, but the screws were tightly fixed and impossible to remove. After several failed attempts, she resurfaced again. By then, night had fallen and the water temperature continued to drop. Emma began showing signs of distress. After repeated questioning from her sister, she finally revealed the truth. She had been suffering from diabetes for a long time. To avoid worrying her family, she had kept it secret. But her insulin was in her bag outside, making the situation extremely dangerous. Sophie tried again with the plastic board, but it still didn't work. Just as Emma was about to collapse, a sound came from the pool area. A cleaner named Karen was still working inside the building. She noticed the 2 bags left outside. The sisters thought help had finally arrived. But Karen looked at the security cameras, then entered the control room and disabled all surveillance. After erasing any evidence, she demanded their phone passcode, claiming it was the only way to call the police. The sisters naively believed she was there to help. They asked her to retrieve the phone, and even promised her a reward once they got out. But Karen revealed a strange smile. She had recently been released from prison and desperately needed money, so she was not going to miss this opportunity. She threatened them to hand over their bank card pins, or she would refuse to help. But the sisters had fallen into the situation because of the ring, and refused to comply. After failing to convince them, Karen decided to teach them a lesson. She turned off the pool lights and shut down the heating system. The temperature dropped rapidly. If they stayed any longer, survival was unlikely. In freezing conditions and rising desperation, with no other choice left, Emma finally revealed the bank card pin. However, Karen was still not satisfied. She claimed that withdrawing the money would take time, and said she would only let the sisters out once the money was in her hands. But the condition of both sisters was getting worse by the minute. Before long, midnight arrived. Shivering constantly from the cold, they curled up in a corner, barely daring to move. Yet Karen still had not returned. The sisters began to wonder whether Karen had already escaped. Just as they were preparing to find a way out on their own, Karen unexpectedly returned. It turned out that after attempting to withdraw the money, she discovered that Emma's account was completely empty. Meanwhile, Emma, who was already weaker than her sister, was becoming worse and worse. Sophie could only beg Karen to let them out. She told Karen that Emma suffered from diabetes. Even if you refuse to save us, at least give us her insulin. But Karen completely ignored her words. As long as she received nothing in return, she would rather watch the 2 sisters freeze to death. After saying that, Karen turned around and left once again. Seeing her sister trembling uncontrollably, Sophie took out the plastic board she had hidden earlier and carefully began sharpening its edge. Then she approached an opening and called out to Karen, asking her to come and look. When Karen leaned down to check, A sharp cry of pain escaped from her mouth, but Karen was not someone who could be defeated so easily. Just as the two sisters thought they had gained the upper hand, Karen had already returned to the control room. After quickly treating her injury, she walked towards the control panel and activated the pool cleaning system. Suddenly, all the lights turned on. The two sisters had no idea what was about to happen. At that moment, the jets on both sides of the pool began releasing powerful streams of water. The violent force of the current struck them instantly. They could barely remain standing. The powerful water flow dragged them around and made it almost impossible for them to breathe. Fortunately, Sophie suddenly remembered a piece of clothing they had found earlier. She rushed towards one of the water outlets, trying to block it with the clothing, but the force of the current was far too strong, and she was unable to stop it. By then, Emma had already lost consciousness from exhaustion. Seeing that the situation was about to turn into a tragedy, Karen finally switched off the system. Under the water, the two sisters remained tightly holding on to each other. When the current finally weakened, Sophie was able to breathe a sigh of relief. But Karen soon came up with another idea. She had noticed the ring on Emma's finger, and she decided to make it her next target. Karen threatened them once again. "Give me the ring, and I'll let you out." The sisters understood that this woman would never help them willingly. They had no other choice. In the end, Emma was forced to hand the ring over to Karen. Karen looked at the sparkling diamond in her hand and smiled with satisfaction. She had finally obtained what she wanted. But at that exact moment, Emma's phone received a message. Karen grabbed the phone and checked it, only to discover that James was about to call the police. She had already got what she wanted, but if James reported the incident, she knew she would be in serious trouble. So Karen immediately returned to the control room to release the two sisters. However, when she pressed the button to open the pool cover, nothing happened. That was when she realized the administrator had changed the system password. At that moment, Karen was completely frozen. She quickly returned to the pool. She pretended to look worried. She claimed that she was not refusing to help them, but she could no longer control the system. When the two sisters begged her to call for help, Karen refused without hesitation. Because if the security staff and investigators discovered what had happened, the theft of the ring would also be exposed. She was not willing to take that risk. Despite the sisters' constant pleas, Karen remained completely cold and indifferent. After giving them a brief explanation, she turned around and left. The two sisters were once again left in complete despair. Not long afterwards, Emma lost consciousness. Her condition had become too weak. Sophie immediately panicked. She knew her sister needed insulin as soon as possible, so she returned to the bottom of the pool once again. She believed that if she could remove the drainage grate, she could use its weight to break through the pool cover. However, no matter how hard she tried, the screws holding the grate in place refused to move. She had no choice but to return to the surface again and again. Each time she came up, she took a few moments to regain her strength. Once she recovered enough energy, she dived back down to try again. But every time she saw her sister's condition getting worse, the pressure inside her grew even stronger. Then Sophie suddenly remembered the piece of clothing they had found earlier. She brought it to the bottom of the pool. She tied it together, creating a makeshift rope. She then pushed the rope through the gaps in the drainage grate. After countless attempts, she finally managed to pull the grate away. Without wasting a second, Sophie returned to the surface. She grabbed the grate and began smashing it against the pool cover. Just as she had expected, cracks slowly began appearing in the structure. At that moment, the two sisters finally saw hope again. Using the last of her strength, Sophie managed to free her sister from danger. Then she found the insulin. She immediately injected Emma. Not long afterwards, Emma finally regained consciousness. But just as hope had begun to return, Karen appeared once again. This time she was holding a weapon in her hand. She was afraid that the two sisters would reveal everything that had happened. If the truth about the ring was discovered, she would soon find herself facing prison again. So she decided to remove this threat completely. Despite Sophie's repeated explanations, Karen became more and more unstable. Sophie promised that she would never reveal the truth, but Karen continued moving slowly towards them. With no other option left, Sophie stepped in front of Emma to protect her. Perhaps after seeing the deep bond between the two sisters, Karen slowly lowered the weapon in her hand. Then she returned the ring to them. As the danger began to fade, Sophie immediately contacted the investigators. At the same time, she told Karen that she needed to leave. In the end, the two sisters survived because of their own determination and efforts.